Maybe we'll just slam right into this.
All right, go ahead.
What?
Episode.
I gotta get my Final Fantasy 15 car in Final Fantasy 14.
What?
So I can ride around.
We still need to do Final Fantasy 15 multiplayer. Why haven't we done that?
Fuck. That's a good question.
We'll put it on the list.
It's on PC and it's got mods. You can make everything a cactuar.
Let's do it.
Welcome to Funhaus, everybody. This week's episode is sponsored by Experian Boost. I've got my buddies James and Lawrence with me today.
Hey.
My name is Daniel. We're here to talk about Game of Thrones.
Again? It's over, Daniel. Let it go.
Oh, why more?
It is over, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions, and I think that's good, right?
Okay.
Everyone's allowed to have their opinion. No one's an idiot for having their opinion. First of all, so we're going to have a lot of spoilers in this episode. I don't think there's any point in talking about the end of this show and try and remain cautious about it. So this is your warning. This is all spoilery.
It's also very little to spoil. Boom.
Got him.
Got him.
Come back some other time.
I would say there are some surprises. There's like
Yeah,
hard
you're
right turns.
You're right. You're right.
But I mean, it'd be like telling anyone.
Yeah.
Like,
You might as well be making it
the same as
up.
telling someone who'd watched it all except for the last episode, but also telling someone who, I haven't seen the show.
Yeah. Well,
it would count the same.
it's a dragon.
Real quick, I was told to let you guys know there's a special code for RTX weekend badges. You can get 15% off using code Funhaus15. This is valid through June 15th. So I've been told there's not going to be a big fire sale right before the event this year. So this will be your last chance to get any sort of discount. Funhaus15. And that works through June 15th. So you can come see us at RTX. You should enjoy it. It'd be
We'll be
fun.
Three
there.
of us will be there.
Yeah, we can complain about Game of Thrones together.
We're gonna do a panel. We gotta start doing that.
Panel plan.
Yeah. We usually
boy.
go pretty buck wild on our panels, so
They're pretty great.
we put way too much effort into them, to be
Yeah.
honest, but it's fun.
A lot of slideshows, a lot of PowerPoint.
It's basically like a 1 hour stage play. Remember I said that.
Something out. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
What if we reenact all of Game of Thrones in
Can't we
10
just do what
minutes?
Achievement Hunter does?
What do they do? I've never been to
they
it.
I can never get into their
Panel.
panels. It's always too full.
Well, it's generally when our panel is.
Oh, that's right. They stack them against each
You
other.
got to choose.
Like you have to choose between
We should trade.
Ice and
Daenerys
fire?
We once the crowd fills up, we go to their panel. They go
Switch.
to ours, and all of us get booed.
Everyone's disappointed. Yeah.
Everyone's sad. Just like Game of Thrones.
Boom.
No, just
tie it all
kidding.
together.
But yeah, I think endings are very, very, very hard, especially in a show that's as complex as this one. I don't think there's been many examples of things that have quite the complex mythology that this show does.
Dark Tower? Like, are we just talking
not a
all
TV
narrative?
show.
Oh, TV shows.
Yeah, TV show.
Dallas.
I mean, yeah.
But it actually started again in like the early 2010s.
I don't know the ending for Dallas, but that's a good example.
Yeah,
Like a soap opera.
Doesn't someone wake up from a dream?
That was the ending of an entire season, which is apropos for this because it was them writing themselves out of an immense
Wasn't that
corner.
the Bob Newhart show?
No, that was Patrick Duffy on Dallas.
Oh.
I think.
Was that the snow globe?
No,
He wakes up. Oh, he sees someone in the shower, right?
that's Citizen
That's
Kane.
the ending of Dallas.
Damn it.
No, there's some show
Yes,
where
that is Dallas.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure. I could be actually
wrong.
wrong about all of that. Who cares?
I think you're right.
But yeah, so it really is impossible to please everyone. I think we know that,
100%.
being
Yeah.
creators ourselves. But I think
Endgame.
Someone's
what about
upset.
Endgame?
Someone's
It's a
upset.
good ending.
I guess you're right.
Someone's upset.
I'd say that's
And it wasn't perfect.
as good as you could
You can
possibly
gripe
hope
about
for
it.
is Endgame.
Yeah.
Possibly similar story, like decade-long storyline, concluded.
Yeah.
Most people were very happy with how it was executed.
Yeah.
Agreed. And I think actually some of that might. So the whole cinematic Marvel Cinematic Universe is very modern, right? There are these glorious gods, and they're perfect. They don't have many issues. And Game of Thrones characters are exactly the opposite.
Yes.
These are very complex, morally gray, muddled people. Also, I guess that book started coming out in '98, so it was a different time when we really loved anti-heroes. I'm getting distracted though.
Valid points. It's interesting to think about, and I think you have to appreciate those things when it comes to the reception of the two.
Yeah.
And I think maybe one point you were making is that you can't really apples to apples compare them.
No.
Yeah.
Well, and it was just a different time.
Yeah.
We want different things from our heroes now, because maybe times are darker than they were in the '90s. I don't know.
It's fascinating to dissect what captures the zeitgeist of a culture, for sure. And a lot of people write a lot of things about the ebb and flow of what's popular, whether it's perfect, just heroes like your Supermans or more complicated anti-heroes like your Charles Bronson's, you know. So it's interesting to talk about, and I think it factors into what we're about to discuss.
Yeah. But someone wrote it, I don't know who this was, but they said that fans that are mad will still watch something. Fans that are bored will stop watching something.
That's true.
So no matter what, I think everyone that's mad about this show still watched it.
Well,
so they never got bored.
Also,
of it.
people that were mad about the show got generally mad about the show within the last season and a half.
Yeah.
I mean, the last what? Because how many episodes were there total? Like 75?
73.
73. So I mean, if you get
That's a lot of
when you really get mad is episode 68. I mean, that's
so yeah. Was it? I guess the real question.
Tap out, I don't think.
Whatever you think of the end, was the journey to get there worth it? And I think that is something you can use to evaluate the show or the story as a whole. And I enjoyed the entire journey. I thought it was worth it, even with the gripes I might have about the ending. I thought the whole adventure, the decade that we've been invested in this story was certainly worth it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Game of Thrones is one of the few shows that surprised me. I have the self-imposed curse of anytime I watch something, I'm guessing all the narrative points. And then even worse,
Same.
a lot of times I'm right, like 50% of the time I'm right.
Which
and
can
then
be a
I'm
real
like,
bummer.
I'm like, Game of Thrones, like, pretty consistently surprised me with the actions that it took and the decisions that its characters made. Sometimes it's just because they were making different decisions than I would have imagined, but also other times because it was actually motivated, and I just didn't think it was going to go that way. But yeah, for me, it was always a show that I could count on to be surprised, and I will miss that aspect of it.
At a certain point, I think, towards the end of a story, things become inevitable. So it might be, there are a few shocks at the end, but it's coming to a conclusion that you as an intelligent viewer are starting to guess the ending. It's got to go there. There are certain places it has to go, so it's running out of time and places to try and surprise you. So if that's one of the things you really derive joy out of the show is the way it shocks you, the end is going to be tough to do that.
I was one of the few people that when they said we're ending Game of Thrones, I went, okay, good.
Yeah. I'm glad it's over.
Not
honestly.
because I wanted it to be done, but just because I was like, I'm just glad when sometimes people make a decision to stop something. Sometimes you just need to stop doing it.
It's easier to ruin something by making it overstay its welcome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it goes back to the boredom thing. I think people that are really unhappy with how Game of Thrones ended will probably not burn their DVDs of season 1s, 2, 3, and 4, and may even rewatch it again. But at a certain point, they'll be like, I'm going to rewatch the aspects of the show that I liked, and they'll be fine with it. It's not going to ruin everything like a show where you're just bored and you just drags on and then just kind of disappears after a while. I don't know how generally people feel about Walking Dead, but that's the kind of thing where I'm like, that's still going.
Yeah.
I mean, I know people that watch it, but I also know people that watch NCIS. So I don't know.
So I think I liked it overall. I have some gripes
talking
with
about
it,
the show
but
overall?
the show, even the end, the last couple episodes, it was certainly a roller coaster this season of going from slow to fast to huge action to nothing happening, back to huge action. And I had my issues with it, but overall I really, really liked it. Maybe it's that I'm glad it's done. I don't have to invest too much of my life in Game of Thrones anymore. Lawrence,
Yeah.
you have more beef. You're also newer to the show than how long have you been watching this?
I watched it when it started.
Okay.
And then around midway through season 3, I was like, okay, I'm out. I just watched one episode where, when you talk about it being worth the journey, for me it was not in this circumstance, because the way that the show started and the books started is that, and this is me reading into it. I want to be clear about that.
Sure.
But what I saw was a narrative where it was fueled entirely by, like you guys were saying, complicated characters with understandable motivations. And I think they really drilled that point home with like Ned Stark dying right at the beginning. Like, here is supposed to be this just morally pure character, and there's no reason a character like that would live in the world of Game of Thrones, especially not mired in the politics of King's Landing.
Well, and that was almost a statement of intent. That this is not Tolkien fantasy. This is going to subvert that.
It's to me, and again, maybe what I read into it is this is a moral play of complicated characters that hopefully always behave intelligently and understandably. And if they don't behave intelligently, then there should be a reason for that too, if they're emotional or whatever. And the books by my reckoning, have been very consistent about that. The characters are very human, and they sometimes do bad things, but it's almost like a mutually assured destruction sort of deal on this land. And I feel like in the broad strokes of the finale, they hit that pretty well with how Cersei was withholding her troops because she wins either way. It's just like it's all politicking, and nobody does the right thing because the right thing doesn't benefit you because everyone else is not going to do the right thing.
That's
I like
the real
that a
world,
lot.
Man. That's the real world.
In some circumstances, yes. And what I really enjoyed was experimenting about how morality exists and to what extent it can exist in this world. And to me, the books have always been about that, and that's what I find fascinating about them. But
so what was that divergent point that you were watching and decided to no longer buy in?
It's a good question because I don't know that there was one specific instance. For me, as season 3 started to go on, characters were acting less and less consistent. They were doing things that needed to happen for the story to hit certain beats. And when characters start acting outside of what I perceive their motivations or their actions to be just to get the story into an interesting place or to create a dramatic encounter, that's when I start to lose interest. Because I've seen a lot of dramas, and a contrived one in which certain scenarios are created or you can see them coming, kind of like you were saying, James. I need something else to hold my interest. And to me, in Game of Thrones at least, the CG is not really good enough for that to be the reason I watch it. The action is not good enough for me to watch it for that alone. And I'm also have high standards and no reason to have them. I'll be very clear about that. It's not like I've watched a lot of TV. I like what I like. And Game of Thrones didn't provide that for me. Once it ceased to be about, at least for me, characters that were acting in accordance with their motivations as I understood them.
Did you feel that way about the books? Because you read all the books.
So it's interesting because I do, but the books also leave a lot of information out. And to that degree, I might be more lenient on them because I can use my imagination, and I have to. So yeah, the books I love because they swap perspectives so much that you get an intimate view from one person's perspective, and you bounce around. So you get to see this world through so many different pairs of eyes. And it's fascinating to empathize with a lot of very well-realized characters that have to live in this shitty world. And to see what that does to good people, to see what that does to bad people, and to see it firsthand from their perspective. The show was more of an omniscient third-person, drama.
Which is kind of the nature of
books
television,
versus film.
Like you could Rashomon it, but I don't know how well that would work if every episode was 4 episodes. Like you'd never move anything
or
forward.
Have an over
like the books.
That totally makes sense.
Or you have someone monologuing their interior thoughts, which is just it totally works in a book.
It's like The Office.
But it's
Blade Runner,
it's
the director's cut.
Yeah, it's terrible. It comes off as awful and corny in a TV show, and that's one of those things that I think makes the books superior. Is that you can get in someone's head. You know what they're thinking. You know what Cersei's thinking. You know what Arya's thinking. But in a show, you're relying on either dialogue or acting to get those things across. And I think it's really hard to get some of those complex emotions across just with a look of someone standing holding a wine glass. You don't know what's going on in her head.
Well, I mean, something I know, we're getting off track, but something I always notice is I'd have conversations about Cersei with people who only watch the show. And having read the books, I feel... I sympathize with her, and I feel bad for her in a lot of situations. And people will just say to me, not everyone, but some people will say, like, she's a bad guy. Yeah. But she's the bad guy. And I'll go, well, I mean, if you... maybe it's because I've been in her head so much, but I was like, well, I understand why she's acting the way that she is acting because I know how she thinks.
Yeah, it makes sense in her worldview.
Yeah.
Well, the books definitely reinforce that she had no other choice. Being a woman in this setting, there are multiple times where, to exert power of any kind, she has to be the person that she is. And I don't know, there was one line in like either the second to last or last episode where Tyrion was telling Jaime, like, you always knew what she was. I was like, well, damn, man, you just reduced her to a one-dimensional villain. Just bang, just like that. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a bummer. I appreciated this world full of very complicated characters. And yeah, there's other lines where like everything she did for her kids. Okay, well now she's a mom. I get it. But also she was way more nuanced than that in the books.
I mean, another layer of that, which I always kind of interpreted through the books, less from the show, but then imprinted onto the show, was that her kids were her weapon. And it was a currency. So she did love her kids. But I don't know if it's necessarily because she loved other human beings, or she understood those, like her children were her skill set.
Survival
I don't know.
mechanism.
I don't think the book takes a definitive stance on that, but it's something I was like, oh well, that's a possibility. It's a currency, and I agree that when you just say she's bad, though, it reduces her, especially in the show.
I feel like they did that with a lot of characters, as in the later seasons, and especially leading into the finale. I think they had to, and again, I kind of get it. I think kind of like what you were saying, Dan, you do have to you got to tie some stuff off. Mm-hmm. And part of that to make it digestible for the audience, and I think definitely they started producing this for a more and more mass audience, is you do have to sort of have characters say out loud what they're thinking and feeling, and you have to have other characters tell the audience what's going on. Whereas, man, the books are the most anti that in the world. And the show, for me at least, started off with that sort of tone of like, we're not going to tell you directly what the rules of this universe are. We're just going to have people have a conversation about it, and you'll have to glean from their tone, from what they're saying. Man, this is like crazy flashback territory
look how
here.
young they look. I think part of this gets to one of my points about the finale, that I'm really interested if that book ever gets written to be in Bran's head at the end, because I think there's stuff going on in the story with Bran at Winterfell, and then when, like, did he organize everything to become the king at the end? Did he plan that? I don't know. He's just, there's something going on with him, and I think not being able to be in his head at all completely leaves us clueless as to what he was doing.
Yeah. Well, can we just talk about specifically the finale?
Sure. Let's dig into that last episode, which I was really into until the fade to black in the epilogue. Like, I liked the Jon killing Daenerys and Drogon melting the throne. I thought all that stuff was good and poetic. But as soon as it went to, okay, what's happening, 6 months later, it lost me a good bit.
So I was okay with Jon killing Daenerys.
Mm-hmm.
I just was like, we're 20 minutes in. I was like, we barely got to digest what happened in the last one. And I enjoyed this second to last episode. I felt like the pace was expedited, but I still felt like it was a point that I not necessarily expected the show to get to, but thought it was a possibility that the show would reach this point. But then I wanted to be able to digest that. And I don't think there was a moment to digest it. No. She came out and made a speech that is all new. Speech. As far as I know, all new information. That's something she went up into a room for 15 minutes or whatever, because like the battle just ended, and then decided entirely on all this new information, which you should have gotten to that point. There should have been some.
We're going to mow down everybody else in the world.
Can we see her maybe like lamenting that she had to burn some kids, but then realizing that in moving that forward, it's weird that they jumped time after, because I feel like they should have jumped time before, and then you could have been like, okay, well, some time has happened to digest. It's just weird where they picked the time jumps. So I was okay with that.
Daenerys' turn, I think, is a big point of contention with people.
Yeah.
And I do think it was really rushed. Justified, yes, and I think they led little bits in the seasons leading up to it that she was vicious and violent. But I think the turn happened so fast without making it clear enough. She lost Jorah, she lost her dragon, she lost her best friend.
She's betrayed by everyone she knows.
Yeah, she's like, please don't tell the secret about my Jon's heritage. Everyone betrayed her. There's enough there to make someone snap, I think. But it happened all in maybe 60 minutes.
She was also sold into slavery.
Well, yeah.
Raped a lot. So she has hit a snapping point multiple times in this narrative. I feel like snapping her now is just convenient for the plot.
Well, sure. I think that maybe the difference for me was that this is the one time where she has control. She has the power to make the snap.
That's true.
And execute on said snap. I still, like we talked about on the podcast, I still feel like the pace since the last season has been expedited. So I felt like that was on par with the pace. But in terms of resolution, now maybe you got to slow things down. And I knew you can't do that with one episode, but maybe I naively was watching going like, well, an hour 20 minutes is a long time. I guess it's
plenty of time.
I guess it's not, because I was like, when it happened, I was like, wow, like all I got before we reached this point was Tyrion explaining everything to the audience, kind of in the most basic terms.
Speeches,
he's like, let me just bullet point this whole thing, and I quit. But it's nothing that Jon didn't already really know. or hasn't been told in a lot of situations. It's not anything Tyrion didn't know before he decided to aid her in her quest. So it's weird that he's the one who realized, oh shit, I made him, like, I don't know. I honestly thought the last episode was probably one of my least favorite episodes of the whole show, because it was a lot of characters doing things. Like, I just kind of lost respect for a lot of characters in the show.
I think, at least my thought on this, is that at a certain point, the show stopped being about characters making decisions, good or bad, and started being about, we've got this plot. Mm-hmm. We've got to end this story in 8 episodes of television, which is a long time, but not compared to the other 8 years of
you know what it felt
story.
Like? It felt like wrestling. It felt like professional wrestling.
In what way?
Where a person comes out with a microphone because they have to have a match on Sunday, and so then they immediately they're like, Elias, I hate your music. Like, and then Elias comes out and he's like, you hate my music, and then he hits him with a guitar, even though they've never spoken before in their like entire lives. Like, it felt like it got very professional wrestling, especially in the last episode, and I think that's because that's when things should have let's go back and let's see these characters and what they've been through and kind of understand it, and let's relish that and let's see how it's changed them. But it really seemed like most of the characters were like, well, that was rough, so anyway, let's make a new decision.
Yeah.
And then I also, just in terms of, it's a closure on the world, and you can't close off a world. But I also didn't understand. I mean, we'll probably talk about it, but there's just a lot of plot things that didn't even really make sense by the end of it.
By the very end.
What was happening to Jon. And
did he snitch on himself? Like,
their process for the kings, and what happened to the Dothraki, like...
Yeah, there are a lot of logistical questions that I have about the end. Like, one, did Jon kill Daenerys and the dragon flew off with her body? Did he just go and tell everybody that he killed her?
I guess they saw the dragon flying away.
I don't know. I mean, yes, I assume...
the dragon snatched her.
I assume knowing Jon, he's being a Stark,
honorable,
would walk up and go, I killed her. Yeah. And then he would go and immediately tell Grey Worm, and Grey Worm, like, you did what? Like, but then it's just weird to think that they were like, imprison this man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hold him, but whatever.
Like, he was the king, theoretically. Whatever, man.
Yeah.
They had to finish it. They had to finish it.
Now, I do think this might be a thing where they've cut and combined a lot of threads from the story, and when they get to the end, it doesn't quite make sense with, like, the Unsullied having the city and the Dothraki are still there. Not pillaging and raping the whole place.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Even though they are blood vowed to her. It's like, it was a lot of weird stuff. I think the thing that I liked the least was the council meeting.
Yeah.
Like, let's all get together and
all
discuss
your favorites.
this. All your favorites. Like that one guy from the Red Wedding and another guy sitting next to him. Yeah. It's like a lot of...
You're talking about not the small council meeting, but when everybody got together to decide who that was going to be the king or whatever. Yeah. And Tyrion gives his big speech.
He gives a speech which isn't anything that... None of it makes sense. Tyrion doesn't say anything that applies to Tyrion's perspective on things, which is so weird.
I'd hoped that it was him just trying to stay alive.
Maybe.
But it kind of was.
He's done that a couple of times.
Yeah, and he's good at it. That's his skill.
Yeah. I would be okay with that.
That was almost the only Tyrion thing he's done the entire season, I would say, is give his speech to change people's minds about murdering.
Well, I mean, they put it a million times as that he's a good guy now. He only wants the best for everyone, suddenly. Well, not suddenly. It's been a slow change.
I think that's why he and Varys have always had this long-standing relationship where it's like, Varys is like, I get it. You love to drink, but you also don't like hurting people. And he's like, no, I don't. But I just thought it was really weird how it was the worst speech he's given in his defense or the defense of the realm.
It just didn't make a whole lot of sense.
Well, it was like him turning to Grey Worm and he's like, we're going to break the wheel just like Daenerys wanted. I'm like, I don't think she ever... she never said that the offspring of someone who is the king is not the person who's supposed to be ruling, because that's been her whole claim this whole time.
I thought he was just invoking her name for the sake of pathos of the design.
I did too, but then Grey Worm's like, you're right. And I'm like, this is a
weird.
direct contrast to the speech that she just made
about conquering the world.
About conquering the world. So it's weird that like he's like, you're right. You said a name I recognize, unless maybe he has no idea. He doesn't speak.
He's way
very
out
well,
of his depth.
He doesn't know. But it was just really
and then
strange.
He just agreed. He's like, we've got Jon, we've got Tyrion. We're not going to let him go. And there's like, okay, no, I'm going to let them go.
And then I'm
going to go sail off.
I mean, I saw a lot of people talking about it, and I agree with them that it is strange that they're like, we need to pick the person who has a story to tell. The boy who went above the. I'm like, every single person standing here has something. Like, that's why we were watching. That's such a weird thing to write into the end of your show is go, the one person here who's interesting. And you're like, that's a very strange thing to say about your cast in general.
You're all boring.
Like, all of the people.
I mean, I think that's a legitimate idea, though, is like whoever's got the best story will be able to sell that to the people.
Yeah, except...
But
Maybe not the one with zero charisma, who seems so apathetic. It's like we just immediately went back into a Robert Baratheon situation. Robert Baratheon wasn't the son of a king. He was picked because he was the leader of this rebellion and then chosen to be king because he seemed like a cool hero with story and a narrative, but he didn't give a shit about the role.
Yeah.
Well, and that might honestly be a thematic thing, is that they ended up exactly where they began, with the small council ruling because the king doesn't give a shit. He does not care. He's, some omniscient being now.
Yeah.
And now we've got these people are ruling. But these people you like because they're the heroes of the story.
Yeah, I mean, I did definitely get the vibe that change doesn't happen, that people can't change.
Yeah.
But it was weird because I would have been okay with that if it felt like the characters landed there. It felt like Lawrence is saying they just decided on that episode to be there and then to make that the theme of the show. Because, I don't know. It was weird. And then the whole thing about the North will remain independent, I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't realize you could just ask.
Well, to me, that was like tying everything up in a sitcom way of everything more or less going back to normal. Because the show kind of ends almost exactly like it starts.
Yep.
Jon's back in the North. The Winterfell is independent for whatever that matters. There's a council running King's Landing. There's no dragons. There's no magic. It's just all done.
I mean, I would be okay with that if it was like a thematic thing, but it felt like it was like we're drifting away from the thematics. Tyrion's a good guy, and then we're like, oh, we got to get him back down to this point where he's like a good guy. But because every single one of the Stark kids gets exactly what they. If you went episode 1 and then the last episode, it'd basically be a continuation. Because like Jon Snow's like, I'm gonna go to the wall. And then he goes to the wall at the end of this one. And Sansa's like, I want to be a queen. And then boom, she's a queen. And then Arya's like, I want to travel the world fighting. And then shows her get on a boat and she fights away. And then
what
Rob's
about Rickon?
Rob's like, I want to get stabbed.
Well, Rickon's a nothing. And then he disappears. And Rob's like, I want to be like my dad. And then he dies.
Yeah.
Like
gets his head cut off.
They all get what they wanted.
They all do exactly kind of what they wanted.
So I have a question. Was winter is coming some sort of lie? Because there was no winter at the end of this.
Well,
or did killing the Night King reset the seasons?
I don't know.
Well, I mean,
because
it's weird that it became emblematic for the show because for the Starks it meant something else. It meant that you always prepare for bad times because even though things are good now, winter is coming, and they live in the North, so winter sucks. So it was kind of like every family has their creed, right? So winter is coming as it pertains to the show. In the most one-dimensional senses, there's a huge battle coming, and it did. That was the long night. That was the battle at King's Landing. That was the winter. It came. Boink.
But did they stop the snow?
I mean, because it looked like King's Landing was covered in snow, and I'm like, no, someone will tell me that's ash, because then it was immediately not snowy anymore. Yeah. It's just weird. They built a big wall. Like, the reason it's called Winter's Coming is because the ancestors knew that there is something, that there's something, and there is I think a climate reference to it.
Yeah, it refers to literal seasons because winters and summers are super, super long in Westeros.
But I think it also does refer to the magic, the dangerous magic that exists within the world, because it was Bran the Builder who made the wall, and he wasn't doing it to keep the cold out.
You're right.
So it was a double. I think it was a double metaphor, and I think that's why it was so compelling. But it was weird that they were like, no. Just that one thing.
We're done.
That's what it meant.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but even at the beginning of the narrative, in the world, summer was ending. Like, in addition to the Night King rising and all that stuff, winter was literally coming. And I thought it was supposed to be both. I thought, like, the Night King would also herald the start of the long winter in Westeros.
I think, yeah.
But theoretically, like, the Night King dying doesn't change the orbit of the planet or the concentric ring or whatever. So
Yeah.
winter is still coming at the end of the show by the lore of the world.
It seemed like the Night King was, okay, since I have prepared for this winter, I am attuned with the climate, and thus this is creating a path for me to march my army.
That makes
Because if I
sense.
tried to do it in the summer, it wouldn't play out very well. But this is going to be a really long, dangerous winter. So this is the winter that I should attack. So it's like a compounding issue, right? Where it's because like there's the aspect of surviving the climate of winter, but then there's the whole other aspect of surviving what can benefit, what survives in the winter,
yeah,
right?
that
Death.
makes sense.
So I don't know.
Death.
Yeah.
Which, man, if you want to talk about unrealized metaphors, what was that white horse thing? Just completely gone.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Just whoopsied.
Yeah.
I honestly thought she was dead and she was having some sort of vision.
That's interesting. I thought that they were literally telling you she's going to go kill Daenerys. Like, she's on a horse.
Yeah.
She's on the white death horse. She's going to go kill Daenerys now. Because she got bashed around in King's Landing and saw kids get hurt. I guess not. And
she knows a killer when she sees one.
yeah, I don't know. When you want to talk about like loose threads, Arya going to King's Landing at all didn't mean anything. She got
Didn't really
talked out
amount
of
to
going
much.
and then got rocks thrown on her and then did nothing.
I mean, I
Which is
agree.
weird.
Plot-wise, like, she did that long march just to turn around and be our point of view for the siege of King's Landing.
But Jaime was there too.
yeah.
So in terms of like the machinery of the story, that thing on the whiteboard was already checked off. And
Well,
that's what makes it so confusing to me.
I think it might be a character moment for her to give up her revenge.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I saw it as.
Because she's got her list the whole show of all the
why'd
people
she get on the
wants to
death
murder.
horse if she
I mean,
gave up revenge?
Night then I don't but I think like her killing the Night King was like a culmination of her being trained as a killer.
Yes.
But then she came out of it and it's like, oh, well, her having pursued killing is now reinforced her perspective on I need to be killing. And I thought that what they were going for, again, expedited pacing is the persistent issue here, and also them just stating their exact motivations. And so when they don't, it's confusing. But I thought it was, instead of killing, she had that whole sequence as the city's falling apart where she tried to save. She's like, oh, I have a certain skill set.
That's a good point.
I'm going to try and save. And so I assumed that she was carrying that new motivation. I have a certain set of skills. I can kill, but I can also save.
But she
And
failed
so
at saving them and then got on a death
She did
horse.
fail really bad. They should have stayed in that little cubby or whatever. 'cause
Yeah.
As soon as she brought them out, they were gone.
They were squished.
But, yeah.
I was going to say, I think Bran is going to have some serious credit problems with the Iron Bank. He could probably use a boost from Experian. You know, the better your credit scores, the easier it is to get the stuff you want, or the less you have to pay. So the question is, why is it so hard to raise your scores? Now it won't be thanks to Experian. They've launched Experian Boost, a brand new way to instantly increase your credit scores for free. Higher credit scores can help you establish and get access to credit and preferred rates for the things you want and need in life. Experian is on a mission to help boost America's credit scores, which will help millions of people across the country build and get better access to credit. People all across America have already raised their credit scores with Experian Boost, and you should too. For the first time ever, paying your utilities and cell phone can instantly improve your credit scores. Experian Boost works by giving you credit for the bills you're already paying through your bank account, like water, gas, electric, cable, and cell phone. It used to take months to see your credit scores rise a point or two. With Boost, you can increase your credit scores instantly. Boost is free to use and only available from Experian. Up until now, you've been paying your utility and cell phone bills and not getting any credit for it. Now you can. My wife and I are saving to buy a house. With higher credit scores, I will end up saving myself a ton of quiche. I can't believe it's taken this long for someone to do this. What are you waiting for? Experian Boost can potentially help you establish or increase your access to credit. So boost your FICO score instantly for free. Boost is only available at Experian.com/film. That's EXPERIAN.com/film. Thanks to Experian Boost for bringing us here this week to talk about the end of Game of Thrones. We really appreciate it. One more time, also, those discounts for the RTX Weekend Badge. 15% off using code FUNHOUSE15. That is valid through June 15th. Come to RTX, talk to us about how we're wrong about Game of Thrones. But yeah, so back to this finale. Trying to think if I had anything else major to say about it. I just had a lot of logistical questions about armies that were still in King's Landing.
I ultimately, as I was watching it, I was like, oh, like the ending. I was like, oh, I do feel like I'm saying goodbye to these characters. I wasn't sitting there with my arms crossed, angry and emotionless.
I think it needs that moment. Like if it had just cut after killing Daenerys and melting the Iron Throne, everyone would have been even more furious. I think not. Kind of getting that hint of what was next.
I appreciated the hint of what was next.
It's a show about the world, corny. And worlds don't stop. Like if you make your show about the world, then the world doesn't stop, even if the characters do. So you should always have some sort of send off. I did like how it ended, like where it got to eventually, but it did feel like that was the fastest episode. Like that was the most where they were just like, nope, don't care. Don't care. It really seemed like there was a dry erase board, like this is where we got to get through. But the dry erase board wasn't made until after they had already agreed to do 6. Like until they were like, we're only doing 6.
Oh, it's time to make Star Wars. Let's go.
I guess for me, what is ultimately unsatisfying about the ending, and I feel like the show abandoned this a long time ago. And again, this is me with my highfalutin ideas, is I'd hoped that Song of Ice and Fire was a narrative that asks, how can someone do the right thing in a world where no one else will? Or you have no assurances that anyone else will. Because every time somebody tries to do something good and they put faith in someone else, they are fucked.
Yeah, you get punished for doing the right thing in this world.
Exactly. So I'd hoped that was what, to a degree, that's what the climax of the story was about trying to unite everyone to fight the Night King. And they weren't able to. Somehow they still beat the Night King, which kind of already undoes the question. And then the ending doesn't really deal with moral questions at all. It's just politicking, which is, again, fine. That's kind of where it started. But, like, once Jon Snow came back to life, I was like, okay, it's no longer about that. Because when Ned Stark died, that, to me, was a definitive statement that pure knights can't live in this world. But Jon Snow was, like, the most pure character ever. And his narrative basically meant nothing. Was stabbed because he was trying to do the right thing. Came back to life for reasons that never were super justified, aside from some weird lightning god, the Beric Dondarrion dude. Can't remember his
the
name.
Lord of Light.
The Lord of Light.
Man, I always thought that was a cult. That's a legit religion. Everybody should be worshiping that guy in this world.
Yeah,
I guess so.
Because he can bring people back to life. Weird. What happened to Beric
died,
Dondarrion?
He died.
Again?
At Winterfell?
Yeah, he died.
In the Long Night
Winterfell battle.
Okay, I don't remember. Whatever.
I think he served his purpose to rescue Arya, so Arya could kill the Night King.
Yes.
That's why the Lord of Light brought him back 7 times.
Gotcha. Okay. And I guess that's why they brought back Jon Snow, too?
Possibly.
I think this is really weird because if you talk about all these things, this show could have gone on for another 10 years. And this may have been a conversation that was had between all the showrunners and all the writers and go like, if you look at all this shit, this could go for 10 years. And an HBO executive is drooling with them and they go like,
we got our Walking Dead.
Do we want to do this for 10 more years? And I know that the decision was made, no, we do not.
Well, I think those guys probably didn't want their careers to be defined by one show and had the opportunity to go make Star Wars. Let's get the hell out of here before everyone hates us. And they didn't quite pull that off.
Yeah.
Also, just from a business sense, HBO is probably in a shifting phase right now.
That is
the
true.
CEO's gone. They very literally are under pressure to produce more content, not less, but more quality content. So,
well, we will get more Game of Thrones. Absolutely. Yeah. There's going to be a lot more.
Yeah.
I can't think of a single character I want to see.
I don't think they're going to do the future. I think they'll do a past.
Yeah, makes sense.
They have those Duncan Egg stories are actually really great novellas.
Just so everyone knows, because I know people are planning on boycotting or whatever, like those guys are going to be EPs. They may not be writing, but Benioff and Weiss are going to be EPs, I guarantee, on their shows. So you can do whatever you want to, but if you don't plan on supporting them ever again because of what they did to the end of this show, then you can't watch any other Game of Thrones show, honestly, because that's what it is.
Hope people will judge those things on the merits of those shows.
Well, I sympathize, or no, I'm going to say I empathize with people that are really upset by how it ended. I don't feel like where it went hurt it enough for me to feel like I didn't still love this show.
Agreed. I have my beef with it, but I don't think those beefs, pacing or whatever it is, take away so much that I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah. In a perfect world, we would have gotten 3 full seasons as opposed to 2 short seasons. In a perfect world. But I'm not capable of writing that. So I don't know how they would have stretched it out or how they would have made it work better or how they would have gotten to those points better. Because I'm okay with where it ended, but I feel like you needed to put in some sort of legwork there. It'd basically be if at the season 2, Brienne and Jaime were in a place together, and then in the next episode they walked into King's Landing together. Like, they have no relationship. It's them on the road that builds that relationship, and there's this everyone's used the pun 1,000 times, but a stark contrast between that kind of character stuff in the beginning and that kind of character stuff at the end.
Because it was gone. It was about the plot at the end.
It was
not
gone,
the
and it was about being the action. So I know Bruce is really into the action, and I am too. I'm glad that I got to see the
Clegane Bowl.
Oh, I'm glad that I got to see the Clegane Bowl. I'm glad that I got to see.
Choreography was janky, but it was a really cool moment.
I'm glad that I got to see the Battle of Winterfell. I'm glad that I got to see the Battle of the Bastards. I'm glad that they got to see some of these really amazing things. I'm glad that I got to see her burn King's Landing.
Yeah. I think it was a cool character turn, honestly.
But it did come at the cost of something else, and it's most noticeable to me in that last episode. When it comes screeching in. It's like the end of Speed 2 Cruise Control. It stopped the boat at the last minute, comes smashing through the docks.
Lawrence, I saw you grimacing there.
I didn't. Clegane Bowl was stupid.
It was stupid.
I mean, I didn't think it was directed well. I didn't think the action was that interesting.
I didn't think the action was very good, but it was a cathartic moment for that character.
Yeah, sure.
I always thought the lack of choreography was kind of a charm of the show.
Oh yeah, I don't want this to be like, it's not supposed to be like Hong Kong style high flying action, but I do think that there are some base notes of like pacing and weight and like camera framing and stuff that can sell the emotion of a sequence, and I didn't get that much. I mean, it's tough when one of the two people fighting is a soulless zombie man.
Zombie baby.
So yeah, that's more of like a brute fight, which is more about like just your hero getting slapped around, which was kind of the idea of that fight too. But it's two meat mountains slapping each other.
Of a fight like that, you want it to feel long and drawn out, and you want it to feel
exhausting
like
and dirty.
Just these things are just smashing into each other again and again and again. Yeah, and it didn't feel... It's probably like if you strung it all together, you cut out everything else, you just took the Clegane fight, it's maybe, 3 minutes or something?
Yeah.
Which it should be like, not They Live, but like They Live-esque, where it's like these two monsters banging against each other again and again and again.
Just to show the because there's sadness there. It is a character that had found salvation, now throwing it away because they are bound to their purpose, which is an interesting character moment. But like it ended with him tackling him through a brick wall and falling into fire, like very Hollywood cinema kind of stuff.
I liked that shot though when they went tumbling out of the tower.
I was rolling my eyes so hard.
I was okay with the shot, but part of me did go like, this doesn't seem much worse than anything he's endured already. So I was like half expecting him to climb out of the rubble.
I was 100% expecting a fist to punch up out of him. I was, when Tyrion just so happened to find Jaime and Cersei, I was like, motherfucker, do not bring them back to life.
Yeah. They did do none of that shit, thank God.
Well, they literally did with other characters, but not with them.
Who came back to life?
Well, Jon Snow.
Yeah,
at the end.
I'm just saying, these are the beats that make me check out of the
Lord of Light did not choose them.
Yeah, apparently not. So whatever. And also, why does the Lord of Light give a fuck? Why does he... whatever.
But that's what I'm saying.
The Song of Ice and Fire.
Imagine a show where it goes for another 6 seasons because now they've defeated the Night King, but then it's revealed that the Lord of Light was manipulating the events because the Lord of Light is 10 times worse, which then is like now the gods are a metaphor for the lords and stuff.
Or
it could
just
keep
predestination.
going forever, and that'd be great, but I'm not going to make it. And I don't expect any of those actors want to make it, and I don't think the creators want to make it. It did feel like, so I'll say this, to everyone who was really critical of the last 2 seasons of the show, and I was just kind of enjoying the ride, the last episode felt like they were done. They felt like they were done.
It felt obligatory.
Yeah, it
That's
did
how I would say it.
feel obligatory. There were moments where they were like, okay, and goodbye, and this is emotional, and goodbye. But thank God. Like, it felt like as soon as the credits rolled, they're, oh, like taking the biggest shit. Thank God. Which is not a good vibe to send to your audience who loves it.
It reminds me of like somebody else plans a birthday party for you, but doing things you don't want to do with people you don't really like.
Oh, that's
So you go and you're like, hey, and you can't ruin the vibe because somebody put in a lot of effort, but you're just happy to be gone. And then go home and like do what you want.
It's a very good metaphor. But yeah, ultimately, I still love the show.
Yeah.
And I still think it's one of the best shows overall, in my opinion, in this genre.
I think it'll take a mighty turn for another studio to make a show quite like this one.
The scale.
With the scale and the scope and the
being,
10
like,
seasons
fantasy?
or 8 seasons.
It's such a weird sell.
Yeah.
There's so much about this show that it should not have been the most popular thing.
Fantasy turns a lot of people off.
But-
Fantasy and sci-fi.
I mentioned it in another video that probably hasn't gone up yet, but the show was pretty broad when it started. They knew that they were making a fantasy show, and so they included sex and violence.
That's true.
That obviously the books have sex and violence, but they made it HBO sex and violence because
Hang
they
out in this
wanted to get that
brothel.
audience. They're like, look what we can do in HBO.
Yeah,
Like,
and they had like incest in the first episode.
Yeah.
It's like they wallop you over the head with all of the like eye-turning stuff.
So I think like there was an intention that they knew they were making this niche genre, and they were like, well, let's put in broad stuff too, so that way we can attract an audience. Hey, if people like that, I'm going to tell you, check out Spartacus. If you haven't seen it,
I need to watch
the
it.
Starz series, 4 seasons, great ending.
Yeah.
Great ending. I can't really think of a point in the show where I felt like it wasn't good. And it is very similar to Game of Thrones because it starts as basically a softcore porno. Like
boy.
it's like someone watched 300 and said, I can do that, but with more sex.
More dick.
I often joke
in.
that it feels like someone wrote an amazing script for this gladiator-based story, and then they had to take that script and then send it to a bunch of softcore porn writers who then they did a pass,
Yeah.
and then it went back to the writers again, where they were allowed to do one more pass, but they had to leave in at least 50% of what the softcore porn writers had put in for about the first season, maybe season and a half. It very much embraces that, but man, it's a good show, and I stay in that it is good the whole way through. And I also think it has a great ending.
So my recommendation along those lines would be Deadwood, which is also made by HBO, which finally got its end, and it was fantastic. It got cut short a few years ago, but HBO finally, I guess 10 years later, made a movie that's coming out in a couple weeks, and it is a fantastic ending. It doesn't have quite the complex mythology of Game of Thrones, but it has the character depth, and all of the decisions that characters make are completely from within them and make sense, even though it can wreak havoc on everyone else.
That appeals to me greatly. To hear you describe it that way, Dan.
Deadwood is amazing.
And it's coming back, right?
Just for this movie.
Oh, the
They
movie.
did
Okay.
like, it's almost 2-hour long film that kind of, it picks up 10 years after season 3 stops, which was 10 years ago, and has an ending of sorts for enough of the characters. The dialogue in that show is probably the best dialogue in existence, maybe, outside of it. It's kind of weird and alien at first because it's a bit Shakespearean. It's kind of lyrical, and they don't talk like normal humans speak, but it is deep, and it's fun to pull apart, and it sounds amazing. Unfortunately, David Milch, the guy, the brain behind it, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, so that might be the last. He's an absolute genius writer, and it's probably the last thing that he'll probably ever get to make, is my guess, because I think he's deteriorating, sadly. But check out Deadwood. It's got a good ending and seriously deep characters and amazing dialogue. And it's only 3 seasons long in a movie, so it's not nearly as long as this 73-episode epic. Yeah, I don't know. Endings are hard. Are there any other shows that have good endings that you can
A
think
lot.
of?
Veep just ended
Yeah.
fantastically.
That's a comedy, though.
I would say sometimes comedies have even harder
Yeah,
endings
sure.
than dramas because it's not.
There's
it's
no
rarely
plot
about
to
the plot,
yeah.
and it's not about ending the plot. It's about how do we make you feel like the characters. I think Parks and Rec has one of the best endings to any show ever.
Never seen the end.
It was so smart how they did it because they basically treated the whole last season as a finale episode. And so I have no questions about what happens to these characters that I love for the rest of their lives.
Did it do like a cut into the past for each one of them and say, like, this guy did this?
I don't want to spoil. I'm not going to spoil it.
Okay.
But the show,
please don't.
The show does stuff that just allows you to basically go like, okay, I know what path these people are headed down, and I know they're going to be okay, or I know they're going to be fine, or whatever it is. And I felt like it's like the show could have shown me all those over the course of another 10 seasons, but it didn't need to. And I loved it. So
right on.
Yeah.
Cool.
Lawrence, are there any endings that you like?
I don't know, man. I'm a turd. I very rarely make it to the end of a TV series.
It's tough. Usually things fall apart.
Yeah, because
they really do. They'll hit their peak in season 2 or 3, and then they'll repeat everything until everyone's bored.
That's the nature of television, which is often why I don't dabble in television much. I prefer a story to have a vision and a point. And a lot of television it's just entertainment for entertainment's sake, and you got to fill that hour, and you do it, and you try to string people along however you can. So I tend to lose patience for that. So I don't finish a lot of TV. I'm trying to think of shows that I have
I do
watched.
think this like prestige TV stuff is relatively new for us to have. So there's probably not a ton of examples out there. I'll say the Shield also had one of the greatest endings of a story ever, and Black Sails, which is the criminally underwatched pirate show that was on Cinemax or Stars, I can't remember.
How many seasons was that?
There's 3 of them, so it's tight.
It's tight. I feel like sometimes that feels more like a miniseries by American television standards. In some cases,
maybe it was 4. I don't know. But it ended when it needed to. It didn't overstay its welcome. There were some surprises, things that you thought were off the table that kind of had great resolutions for the end of the characters. And the show itself is kind of a pre-story for Treasure Island. So it ends with not the beginning of Treasure Island, but it puts, it has all these things going on. Yeah, and then it puts everything in place.
I'm going to be a cook.
Yeah.
Cool.
Long John Silver's a great character. And he doesn't start out Long John Silver. He's just John Silver.
Aha.
And he becomes Long John.
Well.
It's pretty great. Especially if you like pirates at all, or treasure, or anything like that. There's some pretty impressive ship battles.
Cool. I mean, this is a layup, but True Detective season 1.
Yeah,
I was super into that. I mean, just the acting on display, the monologue at the end. Still, I think about sometimes. Well, yeah, most kind of like you were saying, most TV, it either gets to the point it just kind of waffles and then it falls apart and then I just stop watching, or it's like a BBC show. Or I hate to say like an anime, because those, you can tell early on with those if they're intended to go forever or if this is just a thing that's going to end. It's like Erased had an ending and it was really good. Planetess, which is an old ass show, sci-fi. So
I know they kept going, but I always like the ending. No.
Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, but I always like the ending of Trigun.
Oh yeah,
where they did Trigun Maximum.
Yeah,
it's like it's him carrying his brother through the desert, and I'm like,
that even gets that goes off the rails at some point once they start delving into the backstory and sci-fi aspects of Trigun.
You're playing people.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm a little out of my depth, to be frank, when it comes to criticizing television, because
you're allowed to do whatever you want to do.
I guess. I feel like to say something that resonates with people that watch a lot of TV, one probably has to come from that background. I
feel like you have justified opinions, though. You're cerebral and think about things. So even if you don't watch a lot of TV, your opinion it's justified with thought, not just I didn't like it when she burned everybody.
Fair enough then. But yeah, in regards to recommendations, certainly I don't think I'm well traveled enough to recommend anything with any amount of authority. I mean, the only thing that honestly comes to mind, and it didn't end, but it's on YouTube and it's trash. Passions, the TV show. I've recommended it a lot.
All right, you're not allowed to.
Exactly right. This is what I'm saying. If you just like going ooh at a show, at least Passions understands what it is, and it's got a good sense of humor about it, and it is dumb as hell.
Did you ever watch Riverdale?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like in terms of that, like Sabrina, I think is the better version of Riverdale for me. But Riverdale's, it's all right. But it pretty definitively at a certain point makes it clear to you, the audience, that they're going to go as long as they can with that. So, man, if we're looking
CW in general, right?
Yeah, it's like the Supernaturals of the world, which is also a fun show.
How many seasons of Supernatural are there? It did?
Yeah.
I thought it was still going.
Oh, maybe it's in the final season right now. But I think it's in the 20s, maybe?
Oh, my God.
Oh, no, high teens, I think. What are they on?
Supernatural.
Season 14.
I love that.
mid-teens,
I love
alright.
it's on so many channels. It's on like 5 times a day.
Syndicated to hell
Season
and back.
14, you said?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm like, how
I
do
hope
you?
they find their dad.
There's so many like shows like that. You just abandon the expectation of greater meaning pretty early on, and like
Wait.
good writing will set those expectations for you properly.
15 seasons. Excuse
Oh,
me.
okay.
Those are also episodics. They're
Monster of the Week kind of things.
procedurals and stuff like SVU. I mean, if that show ended, they would just do one, and then they'd be like, and then we're not doing more. You know?
Yeah, I mean the golden formula there is to have your self-contained story and then little beats at the beginning and end that play into a larger storyline.
Yeah.
You know? Like what's his name getting hearing loss in CSI or what, I don't know.
I guess I'd like to give a shout out to all those people that aren't D&D or the cast of this show, but you know the cinematographers, the set designers, the costume designers, the sound people, the gaffers, those people that probably never got enough credit for doing a great job for 8 years making a really
Makeup and
spectacular
costume.
looking TV show. You did a great job. Thank you very much. Yeah, I just want.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times people
It's-
don't give credit to all the people doing the nitty gritty, and they'll place every good thing or bad thing at the feet of the two Davids.
I mean, you're talking about black sails and pirates and stuff. Like, I always thought it was criminal that the people that made Pirates of the Caribbean didn't get as much credit as they should have for how they reinvented. Because fantasy is a pretty well-established thing, and Lord of the Rings was huge, and the aesthetic of that is something that it's hard to make your own. But now I think people think fantasy, they will probably start visualizing a lot of the elements of this show,
yeah.
which is a very impressive feat.
to kind of reestablish what the culture would think. The first thing might not be Tolkien anymore. It could be Game of Thrones when you talk about fantasy.
I think you're right. Yeah, and for something that hit all those Tolkien-esque beats, you know, there's dragons and magic and kings and swords and there's no elves or dwarves, kind of, but there kind of are.
They're the
Seers
forest
and tree people,
Yeah.
tree children.
little elves.
So for something that could hit all those beats but still be mass appeal, I mean, mostly because of the fighting and fucking, but still, it's impressive, and you know, it's kind of an easy, again, another layup, but it should be appreciated on that regard alone, that there's obvious talent in the craft for it to appeal to so many people and for so long.
Yes, I agree.
Got him.
All right, yeah, I think we're done. Yeah, just impressive work. Maybe not nailed that ending, but I think it's very, very hard to do that. Enjoy it for what it was, what parts of it you liked. Keep liking those. Don't let episode or two ruin it for you. But yeah. All right, I think we'll be back next week talking about something. Maybe Aladdin, maybe some other news stories. There's a lot of trailers that come out in the last
lot of
week.
trailers.
Got some Tarantino, who's maybe even causing a little controversy already for his upcoming movie.
Because of the Margot Robbie thing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I'll make that face too.
But he made a movie called Jackie Brown. Whatever, man. If
Yeah.
you want to accuse him of being a misogynist, you're a little late.
Exactly.
I mean,
Spit in Uma Thurman's face.
He put her in that car and made her wreck.
yeah. Look at her toes.
But thanks again to Experian Boost for bringing us here to talk about Game of Thrones. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for coming around, guys.
Bye.
For a movie with talking genderless animals like
Where are they?
that are supposed to fight each other.
How do
That's
they
not true.
reproduce?
Evie has gender.
Okay.
Isn't it?
Actually, lots of them have.
Well, I don't know if
gender now,
Pikachu's a boy or a girl.
yeah. Pikachu is a girl if it has a heart-shaped tail.
There you go.
Fun fact.
Yeah, but what does it puss look like?
What it puss look like though?